Hello everyone, welcome to our Tuesday Sew Along. So before we get started with what I'm going to share with you tonight, I wanted to run through the classes that we have coming up. They're posted in the classroom, so if you come by the shop you can see them. You can see behind me all the little vanilla colored labels. Those are class signs, and I wanted to share with you kind of what we have coming up. So first of all, I've got them all across the top, so I'll try to grab the ones to share with you. The one that we talked about last week, I didn't think about these being here. We'll fix this. This is called Flower Patch. This is actually one block out of a bigger project, and we grabbed a handful of fat quarters to play with on this. So the pieces on the border are parts of your fat quarters that we used. So that one's called Flower Patch, and I've got on my page here when those are going to be, because somebody asked me last week when the class was. The Flower Patch class is your choice of Thursday, September 7th, or Saturday, September 16th. So those are coming up in September. The next one I wanted to talk about is the one called Ribbons. It is this one, and it is actually hanging behind me. I'm trying to think if I've got stuff over it where you can't see it. There you can see it hanging right behind me. And it's actually set on point, and we put gold accents on it. So that one is called Ribbons. That one is scheduled for Saturday, August 26th, or Friday, September 1st. So that is when that one is coming up. The one here is Improv for Beginners. This is the one with a visiting teacher. Robin Badashba is going to be teaching that. And it is 4 Tuesday mornings. You come every Tuesday for 4 in a row, starting on September 19th. So it'll be 19th, 26th, and then October 3rd and 10th. And that's a fun class of thinking outside the block. So that's coming up. We have another visiting teacher class. This one, Katha is going to teach. Many of you know Katha, and she's going to do another overview of EQ8. It's a great way to design and play with fabrics and decide the fabric combinations you like before you start sewing. So that one does require that you have EQ8 loaded on a laptop to come to class. So that one's coming up. And that one is your choice of September 23rd, which is a Saturday, or I did that backwards, or August 25th, which is a Friday. So August 25th is your first option. We also have another visiting teacher. This is Mary Beth Haas. She is she was a teacher at NWAC. She's taught quilting for many years, and she actually came from Central Oklahoma several years ago. But she's going to be teaching a class. The session is called Color and Value, and it's either Thursday, October 19th, or Saturday, October 21st. And there's more information on our website about all of these, so be sure and check them out. We're also going to be doing pineapple, and I've a few mini blocks behind me, plus this little project. And the pineapple class is either Tuesday, August 29th. That actually may be the only one I have scheduled right now. That one, it is. So pineapple play, and we have an option of several different sizes. So you can choose which size you want. It uses the Creative Grid pineapple trim tool. So you have options for how big you want to make your block. Then this one is called Buzzy Bees. This is actually just a corner of the quilt. And it is Friday, August 18th, or Saturday, September 9th. You can read more about these on our website. And that may be all of them I have on here. I want to make sure that I got them. That's just the flower patch again. So I think I covered them all. So be sure and join us for a class. That's a good way to learn a technique. You can make the whole quilt, or you can do like I did on this flower patch. Just make one block just to learn the technique and have a little wall quilt, or that could actually be a bench pillow if you wanted to do that. So tonight we're going to do something a little different. Just so you know, that we've got 2 more sew-alongs that we're going to do like the ones we have been doing. And then we're going to concentrate here at the shop on classes. We're going to add some block of the months back. I don't know whether you've been following our sew-alongs from the beginning. They actually started in August 3 years ago. And they started during COVID lockdown because there were so many things that we couldn't get out and do. So we started the sew-alongs on Tuesdays during that time. So I'm going to hope that COVID, the worst part of it is over. So we're going to go back to concentrating on classes that you can actually come to the shop. And so we're going to be doing that. And then, like I said, we're going to have some blocks of the month. So what I want to share with you tonight is just an overview of all the blocks we did during the last series, the BlockBuster Bash. Now, many of you may have done some of the other blocks and the other projects that we've done on the sew-along. And I'm going to review all of those next week on our sew-along time, just to kind of review. Some of you may have done all of the projects. Some of you may have done just a couple of them. And some of you may not have done any of them, but it's just fun to see kind of a trunk show of all of the projects we've done. So I have the blocks back here behind me, and we're going to talk about all the blocks we've done, things you could do with these blocks if you've made the blocks but you haven't put them together in any way. So that is something that you can do. And I have a lot of you that have signed on and put a little blurb on here, so I know that you've watched. I know that a lot of you have watched, but you haven't posted anything, so it hasn't necessarily come up in real time when you're watching. So we're glad that you're all here. I'm going to go back to this screen because I think you can see better with this, and I'm just going to hold up the blocks and talk about them. Most of the blocks that we've done during the last series, and it actually started in January, so we've been doing this for several months with the BlockBuster Bash. And we started out with the blocks that were designed by Studio 180 Design, and they were blocks that were posted. They gave you different size options, and I chose to do all of them that we presented it during the BlockBuster Bash in 12-inch blocks. So we have actually done 35 blocks. I don't know if you were aware of that. 36, Tony says, I can't count. 38. Claire says, which is it? So Tony says 38, and I've counted them several times, and I can't keep up with what I counted. So I'm going to share all of those with you, and I'm going to talk about what you can do with those 38 blocks. But before I do that, I did want to share with you, say you didn't make the 38 blocks, or maybe you need 40 blocks. You could come up with a couple of extra blocks. But I just wanted to show you, this is a block that I did with a class. This was the center of the Feathered Star class. It is old school. I didn't do this with a special tool, and it was not trimmed down. I had to sew all of those Y seams. But I didn't really have a purpose for that block. But it wasn't a 12-inch block. So I just put a ring around it so that made this block a 12-inch finished block. So you can take a block that didn't fit in with the sizes of 12 inches and be able to add that in with all the other 12-inch blocks, and it'll still work. So I have all of these blocks labeled, and I didn't set up my overhead camera, but I should have, because that way you can see them better. I'm going to do that real quick. So we're going to go to the overhead camera. You'll see the blocks, but you won't see me, but you'll see my hands. All right, so this was the first one we did. This one was the Ohio Star variation. And that was the first one. And you're going to see lots of combinations of fabric. You can actually still download these patterns if you want to, so that is an option for you. But this was the Ohio Star variation. It included half squares and hourglass or quarter squares using the Tucker trimmer. So I'll try to just kind of give you a quick overview and tell you which tools it used. This one was Crowning Glory. I had to label them because I couldn't remember the names of all of them. It included the hourglass unit. It also included a shaded 4-patch in the corners, and it's just a big 9-patch. So you can create all kinds of shapes and create blocks with them, putting them together. This is Flying Dutchman, and there's my 12-inch block. But during the time that we were working on this, we talked about how you would make it into other sizes. It's kind of hard to see that, but these are, instead of 3x6 geese, these are 2x4 geese. So that made this into an 8-inch block. So I think I'm just going to do this, and then we don't have to take the time to pin them back. This one was capital T, and you guys can give a shout out as you're watching and talking, and you can tell us which ones you made and which ones you are still planning to make. The capital T variation, there's actually your T over on the side. You can see it better when I cover up some of the other pieces. And that is a traditional block. A lot of these, especially in the beginning, are traditional blocks that you might have seen before. This one, it was called Whirligig. I was going to try to put my labels back in there. And you could make it with just 2 colors on the sides. This could have had the same blue and the same red and then an accent color here. It could even have had the same color all the way around in all of these pieces and an accent color. So that was Whirligig number 5. This was Rolling Stone number 6. And by the way, just in case you've forgotten, there were some blocks we did not do because I skipped all the ones that would not easily make a 12-inch block, and I also skipped the ones that were specialty star blocks. Things that you would use, the Wedge Star, Rapid Fire, Lemoyne Star, all of those we skipped. Get that down a little bit. This one was the Whimsy Turn Dash, number 7. It used the Tucker trimmer for the half squares. It used the square tool to make these little house units. And the center was a squared unit. You can go back if you, as I'm going through these tonight, if you see one that you missed or intrigued you, you can always go back and look at it. This one was called 5440 or Fight. It was number 8. Has a 4-patch in the corners, a plain solid in the center, and then the V-block unit here on the sides. That V-block unit could actually have been shifted around, and as we went through these blocks, a lot of times I would rearrange the segments so you can see how different blocks could be made out of those same shapes, because basically we're just playing with shapes. This one was called 3-in-1, and that was because of the color combinations that you could do to create this block. It had the V-block unit here on the sides. It had a combo unit. A combo unit is a half square on one side and quarter square units on the other side, and it had a quarter square or hourglass unit in the center, and that was a Tucker trimmer unit as well. This one was number 10, the Twisted Pinwheel, 4-patch in the center. This was called a high-low here on the side. One side was high, a long, skinny point. This is a pale blue that doesn't show up well in the picture. And then a smaller unit on the side, smaller triangle on the side to make it a high-low unit. And then these were called slivers, where you had just a part of, nope, this was a sidekick. Sliver is similar, and you'll see a sliver in a minute. Okay, so this one's called a Searchlight. Let me get this off of here. So it has the unit that we made with the corner beam tool, where it has a triangle kind of going across diagonally. And as we were working on this, I got kind of out of control and wasn't paying attention to what I was cutting, and I ended up with a bunch of little ones. So these are 4-inch units. I could actually put those in a block. Let me show you. Here's a block. I could put those in that. Just put them in the corners. No, these are 3-inch units. I said that wrong. So you could insert these extra pieces in some other block. This block was actually called Double Trek. It kind of had the look of Star Trek. That's where it got its name. So just because the pattern, let me go back to this one for a second. Just because the pattern gave instructions to make 6-inch units so that you'd have a 12-inch finished block doesn't mean you have to only make it in that size. So these are 1.5-inch finished units and makes a 3-inch block. So someday those will grow up to be something. I'm not sure what. This one was called She Bear, and if you follow Studio 180 Designs newsletter, they did a She Bear project where they actually put a strip of fabric here and kind of spread this out. It looked a little more like a bear claw, and then there is a newer pattern that's called something about She Bear that has these split Rex units. These are all the split rectangle unit that are made, and then some solid squares to fill in. So the next one, that was number 13. We skipped number 14 because you couldn't make a 12-inch block easily. This one's Floating Diamonds, and it was number 15. So the Diamond Rex tool was the tool we used, and then just had some strips and squares to finish off those parts of the block. So I actually had done a class several years ago using those first 15 blocks. It was called BlockBuster Sampler. And that is one that we did in a sew-along early on, back in, I think it was in 2020. It might have been in 21, but I'll have that next week to show you the whole project. So then going on with the pieces, the blocks from the BlockBuster series, this one's called Peaks and Valleys. And again, it has that high-low unit where you have a high side and a low side. It had a sidekick unit where you just have one half of that V-block unit. And then it also had some Diamond Rex units, and then an unfinished seam technique in that center section. So that one was called Peaks and Valleys. That was number 16. This one is called Salem Star. That one is done with the corner pop tool, where you pop off a corner of a base unit. In this case, it was a square, and you add back an oversized triangle, and then you trim it up so it's all perfectly aligned. It also started with a dark blue rectangle here, and then popped off the corner and added an oversized red triangle and an oversized background triangle to create that unit. So it looks like a flying goose here, but that's not how it's constructed. So you can do lots of interesting things with the way you construct the blocks. This one was called a popped V. This was block number 18. And I started with a V block unit, popped off the corners and added back a large oversized blue triangle, and then trimmed that all up. The center is kind of a snowball unit. I started with a solid square of red and popped off the corner, a different size corner than I did on the V-block unit, but it creates a really neat look. And then this had a sidekick unit in the corners. And we also talked about at that time, if you made a whole quilt of this block, this popped V block, it would create a secondary pattern where these sidekick units come together in the corner. So you can create lots of interesting looks by putting something, especially a part of a unit in a corner of your block, and then when you put several of them together, it creates a really interesting look. That was number 18. This one was called Around the Block, number 21. It had combo units here. It had flying geese here. It had half squares here. So we used the tucker trimmer here and in the corners and the wing clipper here on the sides, and it makes a neat little double pinwheel in the center. This one was called Square Dance. It actually has 2 flying geese here on the side, one with a light center and dark corners, one with a dark center and light corners, so it creates a chevron. And then the squared units on the corners is created by putting a dark corner and 3 light corners, so that when you connect them, you have a ring around the center. So that was Square Dance. And of course, you could make all sorts of interesting combinations just by your fabric choices. That was number 22. This one was Horizon Line. And I put together 4 of them differently than they had them arranged, because they had the 2 units here kind of the wide ends together. So it created kind of a block that was almost directional. So I just turned them so that it ended up having the this kite shape unit kind of chase each other around the block. So that was number 23, Horizon Line. This one was number 24. It was called Compounding 4, and it used a lot of 4 patches, and we used the 4-patch square up tool. So we had a 4-patch in the center, created a double 4-patch with that. This would probably be considered a quadruple 4-patch, because we have a 4-patch and a 4-patch and a 4-patch. So that's why it was called Compounding 4. Number 24. This one was Winged 4-patch. So we had several 4-patches here. We had a blue and red one. We had a blue and cream colored one. And then we had a lot of flying geese that had alternating colors on the sky part of the flying goose, and that was number 25. All of these are 12-inch finished blocks. This one was called Cactus Blossom. It used the corner beam tool for the small corner beam units in the center and the large ones, and then here on the edge we used the corner pop tool and popped off the corner and added back a triangle of red. And then there's flying geese here on the sides to create that look. So there were lots of interesting ways of arranging the blocks in this particular block, because you could have turned the flying goose in several different ways to create some different looks. But I liked that square of red that shows up on point in that block. So that one was called Cactus Blossom. This one is called Roll the Dice, number 27, and it uses a square squared in the middle with 2 opposing colors, and it also used the the split Rex tool. And we had the unfinished seam technique, where you have a square in the center and you work rectangles around the outside. So that was number 27. Number 28 was Windblown Square. There's a squared unit in the center. There are some flying geese on the corners, and there is a half square right on the side. So we use the tucker trimmer, the wing clipper, and the square tool to make that. Number 28, Windblown Square. So this one was called Parquet. Kind of had that look because of the way it's put together and the way the colors are arranged. But this was actually done in quarters. This unit was called Shaded 9-patch. Similar to the way the shaded 4-patch is done, except that you have more squares on the corner. Then we also used the corner pop tool to pop off the corner on the other side. So we created this extra little square in the center. So that was number 30, Parquet. This one was Delft Mill. It actually had a Bird of Paradise unit here. That's done with the wing clipper tool and the technique called Bird of Paradise. It also had a picket and quicket technique where you have, with the wing clipper, it's like a goose that only has one sky part instead of two. And that's how that's designed. It creates this pinwheel look, but it's actually two units. There's one of them, and there's the other one. That was Delft Mill. This one's Vanishing Point, and it's another one that I put 4 of them together because the block is actually that. Kind of an asymmetrical off-center block. We use the Tucker trimmer for the half square here and here, and then the split Rex tool made the 2 split Rex unit. That was number 32, Vanishing Point. This one was called Take a Gander, and we use the technique called Geese on the Edge, and it uses the Tucker trimmer and the wing clipper to make the geese on the edge. And you can add several more rows so that you ended up with more triangles if you wanted to. We also use the Tucker trimmer to make the hourglass units here on the sides, so you get that really strong kind of Ohio star arrangement with the interesting corners. This was another one that when you put several of these together, because of the corners, you can create interesting secondary patterns. And that was number 33, Take a Gander. This one was Evening Shadow, and it actually had a Bird of Paradise technique. You made a tiny shaded 4-patch, inserted that into the Bird of Paradise unit, and then it had an economy block, this square and a square and a square, called Stacked Squares. That was also done with the the square and a square tool. That one was number 34, Evening Shadows. This one was called Hidden Blooms, and it creates the look of a tulip, but it has a shaded 4-patch here and a shaded 4-patch here. And this is where we had the unit called Sliver, where you start out with a half square, and using the corner beam tool, you shave off a piece of that blue side of the half square and add back an oversized triangle. So that is called Sliver. It's in the block called Hidden Blooms, number 35. You guys didn't know how many we had done. I bet some of you are surprised. This one was called Card Shark. It's actually a play on the block called Card Trick. And Card Trick has a center that doesn't look exactly like this, but it does have those parts of the block that look like they're cards that are kind of folded inside of each other. Then in the very center, there is a monkey wrench or a snail's trail unit, which is actually a stacked square made with the square squared tool. This also has a combo unit where it has a half square on one side and quarter square on the other side, and a plain half square here on the corners. So that's Card Shark, number 37. This one was Stormy Chain, and it's done with the Diamond Rex tool here on the side unit. And then the center is a double 4-patch, a 4-patch here, inside of a 4-patch in the center, and then some 4-patches on the corner. So there were several different combinations of 4-patches that create that block. When you put a bunch of those together, it creates the look of the storm at sea, how they all fit together. So that was Stormy Chain, number 38. Number 41 was called Razor's Edge. This is another one of those popped V's. There's my V block with the corners popped off. Instead of popping off this side like I did the last time, you pop off the side that had the side triangles. and it creates a really interesting look. The center is a square squared. The corners are a popped corner off of a half square. So I had half squares that were a background and a red, and then I popped off the corners. This is another one that you could create interesting secondary patterns because of the corners of your block. Here's another one. This one's called Federal Square. This one's number 42. And it has several interesting units. First of all, it has some hourglass units right here. And so the very center of that is a big 9 patch that would be a 9-inch finished block. But to bring it up to the 12 inches, there's some flying geese on the side. So there's a regular flying goose with the same color of the two side triangles. And then there's some flying geese here on this side that have different colors in the sky part, and they're opposing each other. There's a mirror image on this side. So it creates the whole block called Federal Square. This one is called 4 Kings, number 45. It uses the square squared tool to make that unit. It used the square squared tool to make this unit, but instead of having just a plain center, we had a 4 patch in the center. Then there's also some pickets and quickets on the sides, and they're in a mirror image arrangement. So that was number 45, 4 Kings. So all of these, if you haven't looked at these patterns, all of these are available online. You can download them from the link that I send. You can also go to the Studio 180 Design website to their download page, and you can download these patterns. What it doesn't give you is the exact size squares that you need to cut to be able to make the block. With a little investigation, you can figure that out, but I was actually providing that as a part of our sew-along. So this one's number 52 Sparkler. It has a little pinwheel in the center done with your half square. Then there is a corner pop arrangement that we've done where we had a large area that we popped off and added back a replacement triangle, a smaller area that we popped off and added back a dark blue replacement triangle, and then this was also a popped corner where we just took off one corner off of this corner unit, and it creates that sparkler, number 52. The last block we did last week was number 53. It was called Flight of Fancy, and this is the one that also used the Bird of Paradise unit. There's the Bird of Paradise unit right there, and we did several of those. It's created by making that square and a square unit, and then we trimmed those all up with the square squared tool. So that was number 53. So I want to share with you some things you could do with that block. So believe it or not, that was 38 blocks, so Tony says. Those are things you could do with those blocks. Now, you may have noticed that mine had, let me get over here where you can kind of see me. Mine had some of the blocks that were a bright red, white, and blue, some that were kind of barn red and a muddy blue and a cream, which is a very popular patriotic or Americana look. So you could do either one of those. I put together some simple layouts of sampler quilts. Now, the blocks in this sampler quilt are not necessarily the blocks I just showed you. There may be some of them that are, but this is actually from a previous sew-along that we did. But just to kind of show you some things you could do, we had 38 blocks. If you did all of them, you could actually make a queen-size quilt with simple sashing, and I wrote myself some notes so I could tell you. If you used 35 of them and simple sashing, the sashing would be 1.5 inch finished with a simple border, you could make a queen-size quilt. So that's with simple sashing. Or you could alternate and put a chain block in between. So you wouldn't have to have as many of the blocks the feature blocks. So this only has 17 feature blocks. So let me show you that chain block, because I was playing with that and I said, I need to make a chain block just so you can see how simple that would be. So here's the chain block. It's a simple churn dash in the center. This would be a 6-inch finished churn dash. It starts with half squares for the corners, and that's what I have here. I've done my sewing, so this needs to be a 2-inch finished half square, which means you start with 1 inch bigger. So I have 2 3-inch squares, and I'm going to sew my double line stitch, cut them apart, and these would be trimmed to 2.5 inches so that they finish 2 inches. Then you're going to be putting a ring around the churn dash and another ring around that. That's exactly what's in this alternating chain block arrangement. So that's another option that you could do. You could also come up with a block to put on the outside edge. This one only uses 15 of the blocks, and then come up with a block you enjoy making over and over and over, and you could put that around the outside and have still a queen size quilt, about 83 by 110-ish, depending on the size outer borders you use. So that's one way you could put those together. Actually, I guess that's 3 ways you could put that together. Then another option, I have to find where I put it. There it is. You could actually set them on point. These are, this actually makes this about 90 by 109. It still would be a queen size quilt. You could make another row and make 109 square. This still has 1.5 inch sashing with a little setting corner. It still has a border about the same size as the other one I showed you. You don't have to have as many blocks to be able to make it. And it does have setting triangles. So the sashing amounts would be about the same. You would, you can't really see it in the picture, but the first one is a pale blue sashing. The second one is a background color sashing. So I just wanted you to see the difference if you change the color of your sashing. And then this one is no sashing. It's still an attractive quilt. It would be a bit smaller because those are still 12-inch blocks. But I wanted you to see what that might look like. So if you're going to set a block on point, like the one that you see beside me, it's going to change the dimensions from point to point. Instead of having your 12-inch block measured from side to side the way this one is, I gotta go this way, your 12-inch block becomes a bit bigger when you measure from point to point. So you don't have to have as many blocks to be able to get as much coverage. You do have to have those triangles though, so that's a trade-off. Just so you kind of keep that in mind. So this week I do have a handout for you, and it'll be in the file with the others. What it includes is the instructions for the chain block, and what you'd have to cut to make a chain block. And of course, if you're going to make this setting right here where you have that alternating, let me see if I can get that here where you can see it. If you're going to make that arrangement where you have that alternating chain block, you would just multiply what you cut by however many blocks you need. When Tony first looked at all these blocks today and I asked her to count them for me, she said that would make several quilts. And it would. If you don't need another queen size quilt, you actually could make several quilts out of that. And ours actually will probably become several lap throws. So it doesn't really matter that some of mine are bright red and some are that more barn red. So you could multiply the amount you need for the chain block. Also, it will give you a fabric estimate of the approximate amount of fabric you need to add sashing, to add borders. If you wanted to put the 35 blocks together or 32 blocks together the way they are in the on point version. So you may have a couple of blocks left over. You can make a table runner out of that. That way you don't have a whole bunch of orphan blocks when you're finished with this. So next week, I'm going to share with you an overview of all of the projects we've done through the series. And I would love to see pictures of the ones you've done. I know we have quilted some for people along through the last 3 years. So it's fun to see the different colors and the different arrangements, especially on those that I gave you options of how you set your pieces together, because yours may look totally different, and that's great. So come see us. We get new fabric every day. We got 4 big boxes of tone on tones and basics the last 2 days, and some new 30s. So come and see those. Be sure and check out our class list online. You can actually purchase your class online, or you can call us and we'll get you set up. And we'll see you next week live at 5 for an overview of all of our sew-along projects for the last 3 years. So until then, happy sewing. Come see us.